Hello, and welcome to the SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting for December 12th, 2017. Tim, did you want to kick us off? Top of the agenda?
Sure. The first item here was the proposal for real workload benchmark. I think it's from the Alibaba folks.
Yeah, is it someone from Alibaba here? Looks like maybe they are.
Yes, it looks like they are.
I saw Xiang.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm the author of the real workload benchmark. And he's my colleague. Hello. So let me introduce the project first. Okay. I think I should share my screen.
Mark's in the office, but he's on a Kubernetes community call right now.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Xianglin Gao from Zhejiang University, and I'm very interested in Kubernetes, especially the CI-related things. At the same time, I'm also a maintainer of the CI tools. So let's take a look at this project. This project is called Kubernetes real workload benchmark. And this project will focus on the real workload test cases. So first, let's take a look at the overview of this project. Kubernetes real workload benchmark is a benchmark which uses real workload as the test cases. So the key point is the real workload. Our benchmark uses real workload as test cases to reflect the performance of the Kubernetes cluster in a real production environment. So the benchmark consists of three components. First, the cluster lifecycle manager. Cluster lifecycle manager is responsible for creating and destroying the Kubernetes clusters on the bare metals or on the cloud providers like GCE and AliCloud.
What are you using? We should probably ask questions in the middle. What are you using for provisioning as your cluster lifecycle manager? What tools are you using there? To blast out in your cluster, what tool is that? Or did you create your own specifically for this purpose? Because there are many tools right now that exist around the provisioning space.
Okay. Can you hear me? I'm Zhimin Tang from container team of Alibaba Cloud. We have done some research about those provisioning tools, and in my opinion, the new class API looks good to us, but it is still in prototype stage, and we are thinking about whether to choose KOps or kubeanywhere to support AliCloud. So we want to discuss with you.
I think that last time we talk about it is, I suggest and talk to HyperTeal. So whatever it is, cluster lifecycle manager to use to do today's Kubernetes conformance test, we could use the same thing. And another thing, this is not class lifecycle manager is not a key part for this one. So key part it is beyond what we are doing for conformance test, and we want to do something for the performance benchmark on top of beyond the conformance test.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that.
I was going to ask, can you point the conformance, like the benchmarking at any existing cluster? I think that would be one great way to do this, is to say that the cluster lifecycle manager in some ways is out of scope. If all you need is to create and delete clusters, you can create and delete a cluster however you want, and then run the benchmark on top of an existing cluster.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And ideally, part of your benchmark test, it would be a data gathering of how the environment is configured, because you ideally want to plunk down your tests in any environment and be able to collect as much information about said environment as possible. So that way any other person can take that and potentially reproduce it.
Yes, that's the good point. That's why I want them start with HAPTIO, whatever conform test, CNCF kind of focuses, so we can package those tests and can reproduce the same benchmark test.
Yep. All right. Sorry to interrupt. You want to keep going on your slides?
Okay. I will keep on going. So the second components is the framework. The framework includes multiple tests of scalable real workload test cases and a set of example interfaces. And we can use this set of interfaces to expand their test cases. And the third part is the scoring mode. In this component, different test cases will have different profiles to get their final score. So why are we doing this? And I think we can explain this in two ways. For Kubernetes users, there are more and more companies which tend to adapt Kubernetes in their production environment. They want to know whether their Kubernetes cluster are stable and scalable when they run different types of workloads in their clusters. Secondly, for Kubernetes service providers, many cloud providers and software providers will add extra components such as a fixed API gateway and system containers daemon sets in their workloads. So they will want to know and ensure that the performance of the Kubernetes cluster will not be adapted. So this is the core logic execution flow of our benchmark. So firstly, in the configuring stage, we will use the benchmark configure file and command line flags to define the test cases we want to use and other information. Secondly, in the execution stage, benchmark will run real workload test cases and collect monitoring data of the cluster. Finally, after finishing the testing, we step into the evaluation stage. We can evaluate the data and generate a report. So in this report, we will give detailed comments on the system scores and system and give some advice about how to improve their Kubernetes clusters. And so let's see something more details. So how this benchmark work? I think step one is the cluster lifecycle manager will create a cluster, maybe on AliCloud or on GCE or on bare metals. And step two, the test engine will run the workload test cases on the Kubernetes cluster. At the same time, the monitoring tools will install the monitors and collect the data which we are interested in. The monitoring tools will store the data in the storage. So the step three is the evaluation system will read the data from the storage. Then it will use the scoring mode, which is associated with the test case to evaluate the performance of the class. And it will generate a report. In this report, we will give something details and some scores and some advice to point out how to improve this cluster and so on. So that's all the slides. I will stop the sharing.
So you're reproducing pieces that exist kind of over the ecosystem. Part of the reason for some of the refactorings that exist for some of the performance tests, they occurred because we didn't have, we wanted to be able to plunk inside of the cluster and any cluster because it could be provisioned so many different ways. And then from that point, expand the capabilities and execute the tests. So part of Sonobui was designed specifically with this in mind because we had performance tests that we originally had run and they were external to the cluster. So we at Red Hat, when I was an employee at Red Hat, we had designed an entire test suite that did exactly what you're doing. And it was called pbench and cluster loader. And pbench basically plunks down across your entire cluster and gets high frequency data. So that way you can take that back and analyze it afterwards. But cluster loader was the workload profile engine that basically ran a controlled experiment to load your cluster to a certain state, and then pbench would collect all this data, and then you could take that data and manipulate it afterwards in whatever engine you wanted to. Part of creating Sonobui was to unify a way of deploying this on any cluster, right? So Sonobui is really agnostic to what it executes on. So you could create a plugin that basically ran pbench, right? So that was actually one of the intentions, and there's an open issue against it. So it would run down in your cluster, deploy all the pieces for pbench, execute the cluster loader profile, coalesce all that data back, then give you a well-defined artifact for you to do data mining in whatever way you wanted. So it was to unify the multiple ways people were doing things. There were many ways that people were doing this right beforehand. Hopefully that makes sense.
I was going to say something similar. I know there's a comment in this week's meeting notes pointing to an effort that's being driven by the CNCF for like the cloud native folks are doing benchmarking of Kubernetes clusters. There's also a Google Cloud Platform project called PerfKit, which is designed to do performance benchmarking of different cloud platforms, and looks like it has some very basic support for Kubernetes as well. So I'm wondering if there's a reason to start a new project versus jump on one of the existing projects that's already pushing for doing performance evaluation of Kubernetes.
That's the reason I suggest them to talk to the SIG class lifecycle, because I heard some variable efforts, but I didn't see the much. Especially, I didn't see much from the real workload. But I know there's the effort on the various performance tests. Even SIG node also have some node level of the performance test. And also, I know there's the conformance test, but beyond conformance test, there's no standard or uniform way to run the performance test against the real workload. And also, on the other hand, I also know that performance tests will largely depend on your real production, right? So, like for example, if when you measure the network related stuff, how you're going to, there's a huge dependence depend on your back end, and also disk I/O. There's also have a lot of dependency on your production. So that's why we want to run the idea how we're going to carry on. I mean the team, the team and Zhejiang University, how they're going to carry, how they're going to contribute, the best way how to contribute. So in my imagination, we need to define, choose those workload, real workload, a couple of the workload representative to Kubernetes in the production environment. And we need to choose one side of the benchmark test environment, infrastructure, and run those kind of things and generate benchmark result. And the production team, like each provider, they run same set of the test and based on their data, and they could find what's the cost of differentiation of the product for the performance. So that's kind of help the every provider, also help in general of the Kubernetes community. So not everybody in the production. So that's why we started with the class lifecycle. We could start, also have the separate proposal in their original proposal also related to the node. Just run those workload and on the node side, because one part of the node performance dashboard, we choose non-realtic, so like those fake workload to test. So we want to do those kind of things, but I think the best way it is leverage on the class lifecycle effort. So that's why we started here.
I can point, they can always hit me on Slack and I can point them to the history of all the different pieces that are there, because there's a lot of history here. We've been at this game for 3 years and we've have multiple solutions that have existed over time by different vendors but are not unified. And the only thing you can really unify on is a tooling to deploy and collect. The analysis is always going to be custom, right? Like you cannot. So the provisioning is very opinionated. So you're not going to unify in provisioning until we have like cluster API, right? And then deploying to execute is sometimes also opinionated, but if you have a framework for doing that, it makes it easier. That's the reason why we made SodaBoy. But then all of a sudden, now you have the data in a reusable format. The next step is analysis, and that will also be highly opinionated. So it's like you have the front side and the back side, which are going to be custom or whatever, but the middle is the sweet ground to probably focus on. How do you create the tests that you want? And how do you collect the data that can be redistributed for everyone to take a look at? So feel free, I'd be happy to help coordinate here and execute with some of them, at least point them in the right direction.
That would be great. And Tim, earlier you mentioned that Red Hat, I know Red Hat did a lot of the performance test, but I never saw that to contribute open to everyone to access.
Some of it is actually, there's a separate repo that was kind of half started. It was the perf test repo, which actually includes a chunk of this information, but not all of it. It does include pieces of cluster loader. It's scattered across repositories, and I can point them in the right direction to how it's done there, because there was a very systematic approach to how we did performance profile tests. So,
how easy those things is being reused, or that tool, that performance kit, is only purpose for the Red Hat OpenShift. It's not for the it's not portable for other provider.
pbench, all the tooling is general purpose. So pbench was actually originally designed to do kernel performance benchmarks. So pbench, it was adapted for OpenShift over time, like many, many years, like even OpenShift v2. So the original intention was to do generic benchmarks, and all of the benchmarks you get from any Red Hat produced blog is basically originated from pbench in some way, shape, or form.
One more comment. I agree with Don's opinion. In my imagination, we should get a baseline of different workloads by test the workload in different cloud providers, and maybe we will get average results from different cloud.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think having a document that enumerates the test space and what these tests provide is almost just as useful as the whole jiggery-pokery that you've set up. I think it's even more useful because then anybody should be able to reproduce the tests in any environment, right? Irrespective of the apparatus. That's good science, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I guess I think that's where I was saying earlier. It seems like the real value here is the tests themselves and not necessarily all the framework around them. And there are quite a few frameworks that already exist that we might be able just to take advantage of, so we can actually focus our time and energy on the tests themselves, which is what we care about, right? We care about actually doing the benchmarking, trying to generate either through synthetic or through capture what a real workload looks like, and then run tests on that. And all the time spent on all of the stuff around that seems like it's distraction.
Totally. So that's why I suggest based on whatever conform test the standard of the framework, just choose one, and so then we can have the combine the data. So you can have every release you run on the same framework and the same set of the tests. You can at least generate the history of the data, performance benchmark. So test more important, and so everyone can reproduce the same set of the test. But on the other hand, choosing one test framework as the start point will also important. So otherwise, those tests, everybody, because it's really dependent on the production environment. Everyone's run the same test. But we want to, for the giving Kubernetes and tolerate all those underneath infrastructure, what it is the data. New data, and every release you have the new release, and you want to run same set of against the same configuration, same setting. What's the new result? It is. At least we can hope we can find some regression, something like that.
Yeah, feel free. I think we should probably table at this point because I think we're probably in violent agreement. But feel free to reach out on Slack, and I'm sure Wojtek will also be interested too. I know Merrick is working on other things. But I know Wojtek, myself, Jeremy Eder, and Sebastian Young have all worked in this space before. So, should we go on to the next item?
Yes. So Rodrigo said he couldn't make it because his doctor appointment was running late, but he wanted to mention, I don't know if you guys saw Lucas's Twitter feed, that Google GCR.io has just added support for manifest lists. Lucas has been bugging us about this for like a year. It's finally there. It requires some internal migration, and they didn't want to migrate Google containers last week during KubeCon, which is probably a good thing. I don't know if they'll do it this week since we have a release coming out, but sometime in the next couple of weeks, we expect it to migrate and then have support for manifest lists. So I think Lucas is very excited about being able to add better cross-platform support coming up in 1.10, which is, I think, mostly just changes to the build process to be able to push containers that we build to use manifest lists with multiple architecture support, and then a very, very small change to our, most of our YAML files to point to the manifest list instead of the individual architecture-based containers. So that's exciting. I know people at KubeCon were also asking about that. So Nick, you're next.
Cool. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just wanted to have a really quick discussion. I talked to Lucas some time ago, it's probably about a month ago, about running the periodic kubeadm tests that are currently run on GCE, on AWS as well. And so I finally have time to get around to setting something up. The question that I have for everyone here is, I essentially see two approaches. One of them is choosing a set of tests, running them from an account that is owned by the community, and AWS would essentially contribute, would credit the account on a monthly basis. The other one would be running them from an account that's sort of dedicated to EKS testing infrastructure, which is sort of less open, but potentially easier for me to do on my side. And then, so either way, if you want to discuss details and what tests you think need to be run on AWS infrastructure, I'd love to have that conversation either now or offline. But I just wanted to let SIG Cluster Lifecycle know that I'd be taking that and potentially writing a proposal. If it's going to be a community-owned account, I'd need to go through some sort of a proposal process and actually get it approved. But yeah, any comments, let me know.
If you wanted to do, are you intending to block the test suite? Are you intending to block merges? Or
No. Periodic. I'd like to do just periodic tests that are run occasionally that would report to test grid.
Then federated testing. But the problem is reporting to test grid means that no one's going to watch except for a very small subset of people. The reporting to test grid from the federated testing infrastructure does not give signal to anyone else outside of the people who are working on test infra stuff. And even they don't look at it that often. The blocking jobs give continuous signal, which is both good and bad. The blocking jobs being good in the fact that like you find things early before they become an issue. Bad in that if there's something that's wrong, you will hear about it in many, many ways.
Yeah, so that's sort of why I didn't want to initially be in the way or be responsible for blocking merges. But if you think that there's no value in the periodic approach, I'm open to that as well.
I think it depends upon who reports the signal out. If we have a means by which we have unified reporting that we can take a look at, and if some SIG is tracking this over time, so if we have like a URL that we can take a look at as part of this, part of this SIG periodically to evaluate, I think that's fine. It's just a matter of keeping on it. Somebody needs to watch the fences, right?
Right. So are you saying a URL separate from test grid that is just specific to SIG Cluster Lifecycle? Or?
No, just the URL into test grid that of your federated test job that somebody within this SIG manages and looks at over time.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I would suggest the theory, I think, is that you can submit the results into GCS. They will appear in test grid and they should be on I know. The theory, exactly. Yes, and they should be on par other than for blocking of merges. That should all be fine. The practice is it's a little hard to get the results into test grid with the existing infrastructure. It's a little complicated. It's not quite a first-class citizen. And so I keep flip-flopping on this. And I would suggest if you have the energy to try doing both. Not least because doing it directly, like run by test infra, we have that account. It's not, I can talk you through it. It's a little bit of a mind bend, but it isn't terribly difficult. And then you have a reference for what it should look like when you start sending them in yourself and what the feature gap is. And I think once we get more people doing federated reporting, we can start to make them less of a theory and more of a practice.
Cool.
And is there not a third option of eventually moving a community-owned account under some magical AWS billing account?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is there a third option of moving a a community maintained AWS account under some magical AWS billing account. So you don't have to always do crediting for the account. So the bills, once we've established a relationship, so the bills just go to AWS.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know. I'd have to ask about that. But yeah, I don't like the crediting approach because there's potential for, I don't even know what the process is to getting the credits every month. I don't know if there's, I hope that there's not some bureaucratic process that we have to go through every month. And that's why I'm scared of doing that. But yeah, ideally it would just be built directly to AWS, but I'd have to find that out.
My understanding is that the process is not terribly bureaucratic, that like there's a block of credits that has been provided and we're going to see how long it takes to burn through them. And then we're going to decide how often we want to top it up. But I think it's like a supervisory, you know, so it's not like $100 million of like ETE tests that just go through without anyone like signing off on it.
Right, right. Okay, that sounds better, but yeah.
It looks like Robert needed to step away, so I can probably continue to moderate for the time being. He has an agenda item here for the next agenda item is 1.9 release status. I'm not tracking the release that closely. I don't know if anyone has comments there.
I think downgrade testing still needs help. I think that was the big fire from the last release meeting. Sorry, you're muted, Tim.
Sorry, Caleb, you're really loud when you're talking to the mic. Did you say upgrade testing?
Downgrade testing. Well, yes, that's part of upgrade testing. Yeah, downgrades have just apparently never worked, and we've found out now.
Well, my understanding is that there wasn't a downgrade test until a lot of people said like, "Hey, what's the results of the downgrade test?" And then people were like, "We have a downgrade test." Who is owning that right now?
Currently helping debug it. I fixed one issue of where the nodes failed to downgrade because of a switching issue between in the shell scripts between GCI and COS. So that was an easy fix. And now the current error is the master is failing to downgrade because we upgraded etcd versions and etcd doesn't downgrade.
We actually I just merged a PR recently that says we don't downgrade etcd versions. We will downgrade the control plane, but we will not downgrade etcd versions. If we do a 3-part process, which is one, before we even do the upgrade, we purposely make a snapshot, set it aside to a given location, and then we have a multi-part backup. So I can point you to the location of where we put this code in kubeadm, and because Lucas and I were bantering on this for a while.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is put in a hack fix to unblock the testing, which is when we deploy a 1.9 cluster, we deploy it with the 1.8 version of etcd that we're going to use, and then we downgraded that. But the proper fix would be to fix the script that downgrades to not change the etcd version.
Well, this is also a part of the jiggery-pokery of the test apparatus that you're currently running versus eventually we want to rally on having the same unified deployment tooling. So instead of people testing it 5 different ways with 5 different deployers, because we've already fixed this, right?
I agree, but that's not going to happen by tomorrow.
No, I agree. You can hack it, but I can show you the code too of where it gets changed.
Okay.
So that's that. I will try to update the notes here. I'm going to punt on Robert's next agenda item, and I'll just move it down to maybe next week. But is there any takeaways that folks wanted to talk about with regards to KubeCon? Like overall thoughts, how we can change, how we can improve? Looks like you want to say something, Justin.
Double it in size again. Let's keep going until it's infinitely large.
I think the one takeaway that I'm going to take as far as how I execute within this SIG in particular is I would like to get more folks involved, right? There's only a couple people talking and a whole bunch of people sitting, listening. And I would love to have your opinion, feedback, patches welcome, etc., involved inside of the execution. So if you are shy and don't want to chime up, feel free to ping me on Slack and I will help get you looped into some of the things that are going on. If you can't do something, or if you're somehow limited in some way, but you want to, feel free to let us know and we'll try to unblock you whenever we can. You know how some organizations and companies have issues contributing to open source that are traditionally closed source companies. So whatever way we can help facilitate, feel free to reach out and I will try to help be a facilitator of this iteration.
I got one question for the SIG or for the people who are here. We're discussing an idea to have a kind of CNCF project pavilion or whatever, essentially a booth where all the projects could be, and to try that out in Copenhagen. That's something where anyone would volunteer to do that, like for this SIG being actually around for half a day or a day in Copenhagen.
It's a little bit early, but I think we can probably maybe periodically update that one because right now people are probably worried about the end of the year trying to get their gifts giving in order, but perhaps in the new year we can iterate on that one.
Cool.
So it will be format something like one booth per SIG?
No, one for Kubernetes, one for Prometheus, and so on and so forth. Like having a CNCF pavilion, project pavilion, right? In the same way that companies have, a booth there, because people were complaining that they, wouldn't be able to participate in different salons or whatever, and it would be great to have a booth to hang out. That was the basic idea.
On this topic, the face-to-face meetup was, I think, a really good opportunity. So, like, I'm a new contributor to the group, and I think just some feedback on that is it was a good effort, and it was nice to follow up Lucas's talk with being able to kind of storm together on new ideas. We should definitely do some diligence to make sure that the location's a little bit quieter, and maybe have a place, for people to have their laptops out. If we don't do booths, then that face-to-face meetup kind of format, I think, is also a good way to give space for people to join the SIG.
Are there any other comments, complaints, concerns about KubeCon and being able to interface there?
It's the time back.
All right. If not, we'll go on to the next one. There is 1.9 planning, but I think with Robert kind of, not here, but here, and Lucas not here, but here, I'd recommend folks to take a look at the linked documents. We are starting to plan for the next iteration and cycle. If you are willing to contribute, I'd be happy to help guide you along your journey into the wilderness with a hatchet and I don't know, flint, whatever. And there's also what we're probably going to have to do this next iteration as well is it looks like he's got a link here to a mission statement, but I think defining the charter in full scope is probably in scope for the next cycle or so. So if anyone on this call wants to, feel free to chime in on those topics, but I don't really have any other agenda items that I think I want to address this go around. I know that there are separate documents that folks are trying to plan out for 2018. And I'm sure that will be opened up to the SIG at a later time. Are there any more group topics? Going once, twice, 3 times? If not, thanks everybody. And I think the planning will probably begin in the new year, I'm guessing at this point. I know folks are probably going to be, if not heading out this week, definitely the week after that, they'll be totally offline. So as is tradition usually in the community, if we don't get a chance to meet next week, happy holidays, whatever holiday you wish to be involved in. And I think that's it. Thanks, everybody.